Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott skill
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Hello, and welcome back to Lost Signals Discusses Literature. My name is Chris Morgan. I'm here with Scott Thurlow.
Give now.
Jonathan E. Manzer.
So there's a pizzeria in Jersey City. It's pretty good, Helen's Pizza. And they actually give you a discount if you use Bitcoin.
Nice. And Stephen Armosi.
Interesting. That's the second interesting thing that I've learned about blockchain today.
Never mind. Anyway, today we are discussing the short story Byzantine Empathy by Ken Liu. And Scott, I think you have a funny logline?
Yeah, this is an arms race for charity.
Mm-hmm.
Very well put. And Stephen Armosi, would you like to discuss the plot?
Yeah. So this is the second Ken Liu story that we're talking about. The first one was Mononoare, and I can see some similarities. This one is a bit more involved in trying to discuss or trying to teach what blockchain is. And I found it kind of interesting, but perhaps we'll get some other takes on it later on. But basically, the story is that two women are involved in, protesting and social movements in college, but they kind of go out them two different ways. If you take the story at face value, one of them is more selfish in terms of how she addresses trying to get help out to people, and one of them is more selfless and trying to help people more. It talks a lot about this, or it goes into how one of these characters has developed a blockchain cryptocurrency way to give help and donations to people that are in need, voted on by the internet, as opposed to giving charities the
traditional charities donations.
Yeah, like these nonprofit organizations the leeway to give to who they want and to not give to who they want, depending on the political climate of the day or whoever they kind of call master, I guess. And it goes through both of these characters viewing the events that are happening in the world, like these kind of horrible events that are happening in the world, in two different ways, and trying to figure out how they want to be charitable, I guess, in their own way. And the one character ends up Jin Wen ends up developing this blockchain idea in order to let the world tell them who they want to give charity to. And the other character, Sophia, kind of ends up working against her, even though they don't know it's each other. And then at the end, they kind of come together and have a little bit of a standoff. Sophia finds out that Jinwen is giving, or is the one that developed the
system.
Yeah, this Empathium, I believe, is the name of the coin. And they have a discussion that goes fairly obviously in my mind, but they both, neither one of them kind of backs down, and then there's somewhat of a downer ending that kind of leaves in doubt what's going to happen with this and where it's going to go, but it looks not great. The internet kind of loses interest is one of the last lines, and that's and that's kind of it. So that was my perhaps a little bit longer than
no. I mean, to be fair, it's a bit of a longer story, and there's a lot of stuff in there. So sure.
To call it the Byzantine Empathy, it's like this is a very Byzantine story.
Yes, get many layers there. So, what are you guys looking at in terms of score? What do you think?
Before I'm going to give the score,
Okay.
I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Get it out there.
All right. This feels like someone created an academic paper for a methodology of doing new charity work. Came up with 5 reasons it wouldn't, or maybe he was fully planning to publish this, it feels like. And then someone gave them 5 reasons for why it wouldn't work. So he changed that into a story of a really descriptive of how the blockchain works and how the security features of it and how they're going to get people to this. They use VR in order to put people in the shoes of those that are victims. You mentioned one of the issues was people will, first of all, people will view those VR things as like CIA fakes, which may be warranted. Also, people lose interest in kind of what they call snuff VR. Charities, which in America are, at least to the thoughts of the author, are generally former State Department officials and board, like federal judges who are retired and now in this, going in and looking out for American interests versus actually doing charity work, and they're going to abuse this. Many other reasons, and it is a downer ending because it's like someone interested in a concept and then realized why they won't work and made a story out of it. Now, Michael Crichton.
I have that in my notes.
Is very good
Crichton-esque is one of my notes.
About creating closed systems in order to discuss certain topics. And also, oftentimes, why closed systems are not successful. Like Jurassic Park is a very famous example of that. This is Crichton-esque without any of the storytelling flair of Michael Crichton. I'm going to give this a 1 because it was brought up interesting points, but it was more of an academic work than a story, and only towards the very end, maybe the last 5 pages or so, did the story really conflict emerge. It was all set up of theory to a payoff that wasn't worth much.
That's really interesting. Like I mentioned to you offcast that I'd be interested in your thoughts specifically, E. So like I'm probably looking at a 3. I enjoyed the story quite a bit. I didn't really get like the academic like angle to it. Now, granted, perhaps it's because you are more immersed in that world in real life as your studies go on. So like, yeah, I see what you mean, but to me, it didn't detract. It wasn't distracting to it. I thought I was pretty involved in the story fairly early on and following it through. Like I was never bored or like thinking it was like, oh, it's just a mouthpiece for this and that. I mean, it is that, but not in the sense that you just laid out to a degree. So I think it was, at least in my eyes, like a fairly strongly plotted out tale. So I'm looking at a pretty strong 3, but I'm not married to it. So I'll open up to you gentlemen.
Steve-O?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this story. I think that you are correct, Ian. There is a large portion of it, or to a degree, you're correct. That there is a large portion of it that is like, here's what blockchain is.
Yeah, and I'm not saying
let me tell you what blockchain is. Let me tell you how it works. And that's kind of Sophia's story for the first, 2/3 of the story. And you really get the plot beats through Jinwen, and
no, you're getting what the ideal version of it is through Jinwen. You're not getting plot beats through it, only the plot.
No, of course you are. You're getting her, like, Sophia's explaining what blockchain is. Jinwen is, her story is her setting it up and like getting it going within the world, and you get that through her story, which is kind of how I viewed it. But I will agree that there is that, like, overall, I want to write this story. Like Ken Liu is like, I want to write the story to explain to people what blockchain is because I don't think that they get it. Like that's kind of
the Crichton-esque part of it.
That's
for
kind of
sure.
what I felt like, and yeah, that's what I mean when I said that I wrote down Crichton-esque in here, because he did that, and I will probably agree. I like Michael Crichton's writing in terms of being able to explain science in a very clever and entertaining way, probably a little bit better than Ken Liu, but I think that he does a good job here of doing it. So I'm probably going to split the middle between you guys and take off a point for bogging things down in the middle a little bit with like this. No, and honestly, I'm glad that they have this description of blockchain in here, because
you have to, otherwise you can't understand the story.
It does do a good job of explaining it to the layman, and I like that. If you're going into this like being like, oh, I wonder if I can learn more about blockchain, you're going to be very pleasantly surprised because you will. However, it does like bog the story down a little bit, I would say. So I'm going to give it a 2, unless any of the rest of you have a very compelling argument for me to change.
Well, Chris hasn't weighed in yet, so.
Yeah, I wanted to hear what you guys had to say because Steve-O kind of reinforced my 2. Because while I did enjoy it overall, and it gave me a lot to think about, and there was a part where, and I agree with Ian on this one, and I think Steve-O touched upon this too, that they did in a very a scholarly way, let's say, like in a paper, the fact that Sophia was talking to a board member who wasn't even there. He was in England. He had an avatar there, and
I forgot about that.
But the thing is, that part was the part I had to keep going back, and there was a lot of exposition there, and you needed it, which was great. It's just narratively, it seemed a little stagnant there. But once we got past that, the rest of the story, I thought, really flowed. And again, you needed that. So I'm going to give it a very strong 2. Like I said, I in all fairness, in talking about it in terms of a narrative, that's going to be my 2.
Yeah, I think you guys might have convinced me because, like I said, I enjoyed it, like the initial read through. But again, as we analyze it, you're totally right. And like I said, I mean, it's almost unmistakable. It's a Crichton-esque, like, what the hell is blockchain? Well, let me explain to you, right? Like, sure. And then, like, you're right, like, sort of switches back and forth between, like, the pros and cons of it and a cryptocurrency as well, like, involved and all that shit. So, yeah, like, overall, it's still, I think, a pretty strong plot. But you're right. I do think we should dock it a little bit of points for the sort of how you might get bogged down and how it sort of, like, stutters through the actual narrative.
You're giving a point out for not being Michael Crichton. I get it.
Yeah, ironically, kind of. No, like you're right. Like one of you said, like just not well handled. Like, and not that I want to make a direct comparison, but again, you almost can't help it when in any story when the character says, "What the hell is X?" and someone else has to fucking explain it to them.
What is this science?
Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you what this science
exactly.
is.
Like, I mean,
no, my favorite one was they had the tech person who explained it poorly.
Yeah.
And then
so Sophia like had to
like, no, it's actually this.
The tech person did not explain it poorly. The tech person actually explained it much better
in tech terms, but
she actually made it understandable
exactly
to the other fools on the board.
Yeah, and I think that's like a funny little inclusion, perhaps style. But no, at the end of the day, I think I will dial it back to a 2. A fairly strong 2, but still a 2.
I was going with my 1.
That's fair.
All right,
you are entitled to do that.
It's up to you. Yeah.
Okay, so it's to me with themes, and I'm going to go with there's no such thing as charity. No, I mean, because seriously.
Altruism doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's altruism
Thank
doesn't
you,
exist.
Andrew Rhyme.
No, and that does sound a little cynical, but at the end, yeah, Jean-Wen, definitely his heart is in the right place, but you do kind of see her methodology has some holes in it. I mean, in terms of, there's a bit of manipulation and there's a lot of bias in there. And the fact that, the charity was arming, was it the rebels?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what they were getting to.
They weren't using all the money for food and supplies. They were using it for arms. And she knew this. And I thought it was a really interesting and very depressing, analysis. I mean, right away when Sophia said, American interest, which, fine, I'm going to go into current day politics because you're hearing all this bullshit. Well, we got to protect, democracy in Venezuela. Bullshit. You're going after the fucking oil. But my whole point is the American interest, that they're like, all these times we're like rushing in for, oh yeah, we're doing it for humanitarian reasons. Oh yeah, we're doing it for this. I'm like, why are you sending 5,000 troops? Why is there military buildup if you're doing humanitarian work? What I'm saying is, I think the story does, and maybe there's no such thing as charity or altruism isn't the best way to say this, but I thought it explored the themes of, national interest, personal interest, nationalism, charity. I thought it was a really good examination of all these things. And by the end, I was kind of on Jean-Wen's side most of it. And then once I got to the end, I'm like, well, I still see your side, but I also understand it's not a black and white issue. There's a lot of dimension to it.
Indeed.
All right. There's a lot I can go into, so I'm going to try to capture all this part. To speak to your point about Venezuela, though, for a second, Elliot Abrams, is he the guy who's in charge, or Trump reported? I think it's him.
You mean the war criminal?
Yeah, he's war criminal. Okay. He's very famous for smuggling in arms with humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
So, hey, charity. But see, I think that you're supposed to be with Jeanne throughout most of this, and the fact is that her idealism cannot exist in the actual world. That a democratic viewpoint of over charity work is not successful. It plays upon just simply emotion. So, for instance, if global warming, which most people don't care about, but if it happened that it affects only Africa, nobody in America would care about it whatsoever, and that's maybe like 3 people. But that's the way that
I get what you're saying.
The charity mindset of Americans is we care about, like they talk about Haiti and how all the charity work in Haiti went to hell on all sorts of things. So the mechanics of how charity work happens in America is put on a spotlight here, but it's also saying that a lot of people only donate corporations will only donate to charity to get tax breaks.
Yeah.
And through the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency blockchain method, they wouldn't be able to get the tax breaks. So you would need to have charities come in so that they can get the tax breaks, and then the charities could then donate to this. That's one of the major issues that he brings up with this methodology. You got to bring up Myanmar, which very interesting because I know Myanmar because a lot of my students are Bengali, and I forget the name of the group. It starts with an R, so I apologize for that. But there's a genocide going on against these like primarily Muslim, but somewhat sometimes Hindu group in this region of Myanmar, and it's causing a huge refugee crisis in Bangladesh. He's not even talking about that. He's talking about the Chinese people who are being oppressed there and the effect of it. So there's an irony to the him claiming the nationalist negativity of America when he's looking at this conflict only through the Chinese perspective, though.
And that's what I was talking about about her towards the end. Sure. It's just like, and that's what I meant about nationalism.
Yeah. So it's a very actually a number of complex thoughts they bring into it, both about the nature of charity, the nature of geopolitics.
Yeah.
And I have to give it credit for that. It's a very liberal bent in a lot of ways, but a very cynical bent too.
Yeah. So. And I like that. So I'm just going to give you a line. Like you guys mentioned a lot of things because the story kind of throws it all in there and tries to like balance it out and address them all. I think it does for the most part. So I'm just going to give you a line I thought was not funny, like cynically amusing, perhaps I'll say. It's just, quote, "America is only a democracy for those lucky enough to be Americans. To everyone else, it's just a dictator with the biggest bombs and missiles."
And that's an outside looking in on America.
Sure.
Like there are people in America who are oppressed by America.
Right. I'm just saying.
I was going to say, in America, it's who has the most money.
Exactly. So it's sort of a microcosm. Well, I'm saying, all that stuff is definitely addressed. And it may not be like, sorry, Steve-O, it may not be like super satisfactory, but it's certainly there. And I do like the cynical bent to it, like how altruism like may or may not exist. Probably doesn't. Or at least that seems to be the angle it's pushing towards. But I'm saying I think he does a good job of throwing all that stuff into the story and addressing it pretty well. So go ahead.
I do like where he positions these characters. One a full-fledged American, another a Chinese immigrant to America who went to school there, and I think that's what Ken Liu did. I think he moved to America at some point.
I'm not sure his personal history.
I'm not exactly sure, but the idea that it's somebody with a foot in both countries is an interesting way to place the, I'm going to call her the main protagonist because she is pretty obviously the one you're supposed to be on the side of, I think, anyway.
Yes, I agree.
I thought it was going to be interesting to see if anybody said, like, oh, I kind of agree with this other person. I thought that Sophia was kind of placed as the villain in this, right? Mm. And I think that But
More than not, yeah.
But I was wondering if, like, somebody with a different point of view than me, like, we're all fairly liberal people here, or liberally minded anyway. So, like, I wonder if people on the other side might see it the opposite way. I don't know if that's the case. I think it's fairly,
I think the intentions are clear.
I think
it's
I think it's fairly well intended that you're supposed to agree with
that's the case.
liberal mindset, and Jin Wen here, and then Sophia is supposed to be kind of the villain of the piece. But I do think that this is pretty strong on this theme of, like, well, not only does it go after America, which by every right it should, but it goes after China as well in terms of their global politics, and it's basically just saying any sufficiently large country or, like, governmental agency or government in general is going to be kind of against being charitable, and
Sure.
I think that's a large portion of the theme of this story, which I think it goes about talking about in an interesting way, and does confront that pretty head on, and says what it wants to say pretty clearly, and I'm going to give it credit for that.
So one of the interesting things is they bring up a point about America having this ideal of individualism, and even Jean Wen believes in that kind of that stereotype is accurate. However, one, it plays out interestingly on the internet.
Yeah,
true.
But also, the one actually American character we see is as statist as one can actually get, which is the criticism of Jean Wen's criticism of China. I don't know, I thought that was...
No, it's interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Both characters are certainly, like, have their flaws, but I do agree that you're, like, we're getting to it in a sec, but you are probably, like, meant to be more sympathetic to Jean Wen, for sure. But all I'm saying is, like, I'm going to give themes a pretty strong one because I think it does do a good job via them and their perspectives and their sort of philosophical arguments against each other, filling out all these themes. And not really providing an answer, because I don't think there actually is one. But I'm, like, at least bringing it to light. Like you said, putting a spotlight on it, one of you said.
To be fair, it felt like a soapbox at times, but I'm not going to detract for that.
Well, I was going to say, but that was the thing when I was talking about Jean Wen towards the end, because it does seem to be that Ken Liu understood biases, and even understood his own biases, and he understood, where his country was. I mean, I don't think the author himself was blind to him. This is why I feel like at the end you got that twist, for me anyway, that I wasn't completely, like, I just kind of felt that she was kind of doing what she thought was right, but maybe not always going about it as altruistically as she could.
You're a crypto-fascist American, I understand that.
I am.
Obviously.
All right, Gore Vidal.
Yeah. But anyway, I think
yeah,
themes is one.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 1.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. One's all around, it sounds like.
I think so, yep.
Okay.
And Scott, who is our antagonist?
Altruism, America, like, insert any of that. Like, I mean, it's interesting because, like you said, Sivo, maybe different, like, depending who you are and how you, like, take this reading, you might insert a different thing here. But to me, it's like, yeah, like, sort of like that, like, the apathy of people in general, and, like, especially the internet, and, like, the machinations of corporate and governmental entities and so forth, like, all that stuff. So I think you can pick any one of those. Like, I guess my point is, regardless of which one you probably pick, it's probably effective. I think it's pretty well laid out. That sort of the stakes and the one viewpoint, one philosophical angle versus another about how to address this, like, properly, and how to actually get people who might be suffering in need of aid the actual aid they need, and in what way, in what manner. So yeah, it's a lot of, like, morally gray and ethically, like, unclear stuff, I would say. But I don't know if, like, again, I think you can sort of revolving door, like, in a sense, an antagonist, and whichever one you pick, the story has enough of it there to make it seem like that's the one that you should be again, or is the antagonistic force.
So there's a great part in this where they're trying to provide service to, I believe, the Myanmar region, and the farmers there are like, when are we getting self-service back?
Yeah.
Like, is that like the intent of charity work on that point? So I think that there are...
Well, if you want to receive your Bitcoin or whatever,
Well, the thing is, I while I don't think this narrative structure is great, I think that the rigorous academic look at the problem. So he builds up this concept of a democratic charitable organization through the internet, and then takes a sledgehammer to it. And each blow is taken from a different point of view over do people actually know what they need when it comes to charity work? Will they distribute it fairly?
Sure.
Will people only donate based on emotion? Will they eventually get bored of that? I mean, hell, a lot of American medical care is done through GoFundMe, which I forget where I heard this from, which is saying that means if you're a cute child with brain cancer or a hot woman, you have no problems with your health care. If you're a middle-aged guy who has lung cancer, you're screwed because no one's going to donate to you. And but that's to the point, I think, of what the author is making, is that if you do charity by
purely by that,
there is faults with that as well.
Yep.
So,
but go on, Siva. You were going to say something.
Well, I do agree with that. I like the fact that there are built-in gatekeepers, or not necessarily gatekeepers, but built-in people that are there to be the oracles, as they say, in this. So, like, in the system, there's people that are built in that kind of choose which.
It discusses the various aspects of
who gets the money that comes out of this. And, like, there's a lot that went into thinking about this system, I think. And yeah, there are problems with it. I completely agree. But you guys know me.
It's not a perfect system.
In terms of antagonists, I like to discuss concrete characters if I can, if I think there's an obvious one. And I think that Sophia is the obvious one in this. In terms of that, I think that it's an interesting dynamic that she has with Zhenwen, and their back and forth is a lot of, like, it reminds me of back and forth that I had in college with people that perhaps I don't talk to as much anymore, or like whatever. But there's always, like, I feel like when you're younger, you have this, like, need to kind of debate people, and as you get older, you kind of cement your beliefs more and more, and the people that don't line up with them, you kind of stop talking to. So I like that they get into this dialogue between the two of them at the end there, and even though neither one of them changes each other's minds, as always happens, especially like when you're talking about problems of the internet, they have the discussion about it at least, and that's good. I don't think that there's anything wrong with having that discussion, especially when it's two people that ostensibly think that they're doing the right thing, and that doesn't mean to say that one of them isn't wrong.
Sure. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can
but they have enough. But they have enough respect for each other to actually go in and talk to each other and have the discussion.
Yeah, but they're more comfortable in each other's echo chamber, and I don't think that anything is actually resolved, especially from Zhenwen's point of view, over their dialogue.
What do you mean in each other's echo chamber?
I think that there, as you mentioned, that you generally want to surround yourself with people who agree with your point of view, and you don't like to have conflict as you grow older. You can very much see that in America, and I think that their dialogue at the end, while important for getting the thematic points across, I don't think
has that dynamic to it.
Convinced either each other of anything.
Right. Yeah.
They stated their point and rejected it, or at least Zhenwen, from the point of view that you get from that, rejects Sophia's point of view from what I remember on that.
So does also Sophia rejects her point of view.
And that's the what I was going for, is that they had the dialogue, but it's a meaningless dialogue because they're both so entrenched in their viewpoints.
I mean, I think it's always been like that, though.
Oh yeah, and Sophia is on the corporate asset, the incremental, the pragmatist. I think we had a conversation once upon a time about something I had heard, but incrementalism is good for people not directly involved in the situation. So I think we were talking about the fact that black people get killed by police officers constantly. And as a white person, you're like, oh, like, we can come up with incremental solutions for this. Yeah, but it's not our people who are getting shot in the streets.
Yeah.
I guess I'm more on the Zhenwen side of bolder action and idealistic action versus the pragmatist that is Sophia.
Well, don't get me wrong. I love the idea of doing something like this in terms of blockchain. I don't think it's the perfect answer, but I think it'd be interesting to see somebody try something similar.
Go fund me.
Yeah.
Go fund yourself.
God. All that stuff is very interesting, but I'm saying, like, you just had a pretty good back and forth yourself, and we probably go on, but I'm saying that's pretty strong evidence to give it a 1 in Antagonist because there's so much, it's so rife to explore.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really give you any answers, like I said, so.
Well, I think Sophia is the face of, is definitely the face for the bigger idea of ulterior motive. What comes to me though, cause I know I was a little cynical before that says charity doesn't exist, but listen to you guys, I kept thinking, I thought of the term, think globally, act locally, because if you think about it, and this isn't really true, like, you know, as we are, I know we all have various struggles, we have various backgrounds, but none of us in this room comes from like privilege. We've all kind of, so we have a tendency to be more empathetic.
We're American. We come from privilege.
All right.
In a very general way, yes,
okay.
of course.
For Americans, I don't think, I mean, all right. We're middle class, okay?
None of us are rich as fuck, all right?
Right, none of us are rich as fuck. No, the point I'm getting to is, all right, for me, I've had times in my life where I was couch surfing, and were it not for the grace of family and friends, I would have been on the streets. You know, I had no health care. Fortunate, you know, I worked a part-time job that actually, where I was able to get health care. You know, and it's, and when I got my job and I was paying for being bipolar, I was paying for my Lamictal until it became a generic. I was paying $130 a month. I'm going to be more sympathetic to healthcare when I give to our local food bank, you know, and to Elijah's Promise down here, because to me, people who can't afford goods, you know, I can afford to do whatever I can to donate. To me, that's important. This is what I can do locally.
It's a cause you can
because
get behind.
I'm not going to, you know, it's just like, oh, you were talking about like Africa before. It's like, well, if global warming was only affecting Africa, we can have 2 really good concerts and a couple singles and, you know, do whatever we can to make ourselves feel better. But I lived in Los Angeles for a while, and there are more homeless on the streets, and you've got this liberal idea of Hollywood, but how many celebrities really give to their community? Why are they having like $1 billion award shows when there's like homeless around there and they're supposed to be these liberals? My whole point is,
so Hollywood liberals are the antagonists of this story?
No.
That's what he's giving a 1 to.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you don't have to worry about a random drone strike hitting your house.
No. I know
think
that.
we've gone a little far afield here.
No.
Guys, we're at half an hour at this point.
Global geopolitics.
We've just gone over
Global
the half-hour mark.
geopolitics is the antagonist.
We're on the 3rd question. Perhaps we should move on.
All right. Sorry about that, but I'm going to give it a 1. I was just sitting here. I was sitting here thinking about all this stuff, and I'm like, all right, this is a good discussion story. Whatever I'm saying.
I do appreciate
whatever he's saying.
I almost said, like, why don't we just throw out the rest of these questions and talk about this for the next half an hour? And we'll call it an
no,
episode.
I mean, because I was building on what you guys were saying, so I was just like, I don't even remember who the antagonist is anymore, but Sophia's the face of whatever you were saying.
All of us in this room.
Yeah, we're all antagonists.
We're all a bunch of dicks.
I want to know
as
how
always.
many people who are lisuning to us are listening to this and have shut it off
listening
about
to
this
this.
Everybody
time.
turned it off by now. Yeah.
You fucking commies. All right. This is so
Are they calling our audience commies, or are they calling us commies?
calling us
Are
commies.
we the commies?
I don't think our audience
I don't know.
is calling us
Everybody's coming.
Everyone's a commie.
Anyway, protagonist.
protagonist to Ian.
Yes, I like Jean-Wen. I liked your idealism. Yes, it was mistaken, and it had repercussions that she wasn't expecting. But all good things have repercussions you're not expecting, especially when you're dealing with America. So yeah, 1.
Yeah, so I will
In and
probably,
out, nice.
I'll probably follow. So yeah, since you said we're running along, yeah, I thought she was an interesting character. And now that I think about it, this almost had a bit of a William Gibson-ish feel, just because of the nature of like, you know, exploring like sort of on the cusp, like cutting edge technology stuff. So you got the VR, cryptocurrency, blockchain, you all mentioned all that. Excuse me. And so yeah, I did think I enjoyed following along with her story, and her setup, and then her sort of dynamic, like I said, like switching back, flashing back to her previous relationship and meeting with Sophia and all that. And yeah, I think she was a well drawn out character, even if, of course, like we said, they both became mouthpieces for themselves and nothing was really resolved. But I think she was still an excellent character overall, and given the nature of the whole plot. So I'll give her a 1.
I agree. I give her 1.
Now we're pressuring him into answering very
Yes,
very
I'm
briefly.
sorry. I didn't mean to make all of you completely self-conscious.
No, you were, no,
Hurry up.
no,
Can't go
you
10
were
minutes
right.
a question.
No, you were right. We were discussing narrative, but we got caught up in the work, which is valid.
That's a credit to the work, perhaps itself.
And
is all.
at least we're not like dry discussions. So, Steve-O, would you like to tell us
guess
about
your
the
mileage
secondary
may vary.
characters?
Well, hold on. I didn't even talk about the protagonist
Oh,
yet.
I'm sorry. I assumed you had agreed with all of us.
I do agree, but I want to say at least 7 words.
Go ahead.
It's going to be more than 7. Stop
That's
counting.
already 3 fucking words.
I do like her. I think it's interesting that he puts forward a protagonist. Ken Liu puts forward a protagonist who has an idea, and I think it's important for people to have ideas. I think that even if they're and like big ideas, ideas that could be world changing, and that are at least trying to make a positive impact on the world. And nothing's going to be perfect, but I think that she is a good character insofar as she tries to put forward something and is passionately behind it. And I like that about
Good
her.
point.
So I will give her 1.
Excellent.
And now I'm going to talk about supporting characters.
Go for it.
Tech CEO, husband of MP, judge, the internet. These are all supporting characters of this story. They are all basically
Caricatures.
what there's an old like Kelly Sue DeConnick saying where it's like she's talking about women in stories where it's like if you can replace a woman with a lamppost, then she's not a good character. And I feel like all of these characters can be like exchanged with anything else that just says the same things that they say, and like their positions are there to give the tiniest bit of like flair or like whatever like
bit of world building,
understanding to what's going on. But I don't think any of these supporting characters are all that great. They're there to ask the questions so that somebody can tell you what blockchain is.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say.
Here's the thing: is their titles do have a purpose. The vacuity of people who are in charge of distributing aid in America. A former judge, husband of a MP.
Who's actually an avatar.
Yeah.
No, well, he's joining them via virtual meeting
that's
or
what
whatever.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's a big blue character.
They're theoretically not important people making these decisions.
Yeah.
But they still have that. Things that there is a little bit of meaning to it.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, they're mostly, like, audience surrogates, again, it's the Michael Crichton thing. Like, they have to put some role there.
Somebody has to ask what this fucking blockchain is.
But although, like, of course, it does make sense that, like, it's sort of like a peek behind the scenes, like, of who really runs, like, NPOs, like, shit like that. So, like, yeah, it adds just enough believability, but you're right, Steve-O, like, there's not very much dynamic to them. Dimension to them, that is.
Banality of charity.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
The most dynamic character is the
internet itself.
The anonymous
possibly.
internet people.
Which, like, I mean, and I think they're portrayed pretty well because the ending stinger is basically the internet being like, whatever, what's next? Like, I don't care anymore.
Literally, I don't know if you guys noticed it, but it's Anon and then a picture of a mouse as anonymous.
Yes, I did notice that. Like,
I fucking love
some nice text play, if you will.
Is Anony Mouse. So.
But yeah, I will agree that they're just sort of there to fill out like just that aspect of it. So they're not like characters really unto themselves. So I'll probably just give it a default 0 in that sense because it's not the point of the story. That's not like the meat of it, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to say that the random people on the internet kind of act as a Greek chorus. I think that they actually give all this dry stuff in a lot of ways purpose. I feel like in a way it's breaking the fourth. Like if it was just the mindless people in the boardroom, whatever, I would give it a 0. But I think the as brief as they are, the 4 or 6 lines, whatever, of the random internet people actually does have some weight to it.
Some substance.
Yeah, it does. I think its purpose is actually there is a purpose for this. I think it is important. So I'm going to give it a 1 just based on them.
Good call.
I'm still probably going to stick with the 0.
I really like that argument. I think that you are correct in that the people, like the internet is really it's almost like the wave of like the will of the people, right? It's like those 2 or 3 people that they have that are having these internet conversations that Jinwen is paying attention to.
The demos.
But that said, I'm not sure there's enough there for me to give it a 1. I think I'm going to stick with a 0 on this. However, that is a very good argument, and I think that it does deserve to be called out and said as you have.
Thank you.
1. You convinced me, Chris.
Thank you.
It's pretty close. Yeah, like, you're right about that aspect. Of course, I agree with that. Yeah, well done for sure, buddy. But I still don't think for me it's just not enough quite. Almost there, but not quite. But noble effort.
Okay. Fair enough. So I guess it's to me with dialogue.
Yep.
Dialogue it up.
Okay. I actually do like the dialogue in this, and I'm going to go back to the random people on the internet because as I think what they say holds as much agency. And I really like this stinger at the ending where they're like, well, this and that, and there could be war between the United States and China. Yeah. So what's going, it's just like, so I'm bored with this.
Anyways,
what's going on?
VR snuff porn's getting old.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is as much as I considered their dialogue secondary, I think, we'll go into style later, but I'm going to say in terms of dialogue, I thought it was effective. And again, to what I consider the secondary characters, I thought what they said was important, and I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was solid enough. I think it was, especially like the again, the philosophical like dynamic at the end between Sophia and Janwen was well done. Like, it was better. It could have been like more stilted, but I don't think it was. And like even the Crichton-esque stuff was perfectly fine. It was handled like again decently. So I think overall, just in general, just in general for me, like, yeah, the dialogue, it's a fine one.
Would you like to go?
0. Bad Crichton cosplay.
I like that as a phrase, but I'm sticking with the 1.
So here's the interesting thing. I was actually leaning towards a 0 for the dialogue because I feel like some of it is decent, but a lot of it is just call and response, like, hey, why don't you give me a reason to explain blockchain to you? Oh, thank you, I will. And then they do that. But what I'm going to give it a 1 for is what I gave is what I didn't give supporting characters a 1 for. With the internet, like, the lines that I really remember from this are the conversations from people on message boards or whatever that Jinwen was watching, and I really enjoyed those back and forths between people, and I do take them as dialogue in terms of this story. So I'm going to give it a softer 1, but a 1 nonetheless for that interaction.
Okay. And there's Scott with style.
Yeah, so I'm looking at a fairly strong one to lead off with. Any points I may have taken away elsewhere, I think Ken Liu's a really good writer. We enjoyed his other story that we reviewed. So in general, and like I have some actually highlighted some lot here and there, so I'll just read one that I like maybe ties into themes as we were saying earlier. It just reads, in the West, popular apathy functioned more effectively than any official censorship. And like that, like again, is darkly humorous to me, and I always will appreciate something like that. And there's various other lines, but and yeah, just in general, his style is quite palpable. Like, it's easy to get through. It's a bit more than just sort of straightforward, but it's well done, well balanced. Descriptions are quite nice. He paints, I think, a pretty solid, again, if cynical view of the modern world. So I'm probably almost always going to give an author credit when it does that. So
I'm going to be quick about this. I did enjoy the near future.
Yeah, 20 minutes into the future stuff.
Of like VR, blockchain, cryptocurrency. I didn't enjoy the discussion about blockchain, but I enjoyed the implementation of this world that they're building. And yeah, good on you for bringing up Myanmar. People do.
Sure.
Yeah, I really loved how much they went into kind of the current, geopolitical climate and things that are going on, along with the importance of new technologies that are coming out and that are going to affect the way that people see not only charity, but like anything that really goes into how people are treated, even if they don't necessarily have access to those things, they're still affecting their lives. And I think that's really interesting. I liked a lot of the style. Like I mentioned earlier, there was some of it that really bugged me a little bit, which is like a lot of that call and response type stuff. But I think that it's overridden by.
Yeah.
I enjoy the style overall of this, and I like what was brought up. I like the way that Ken Liu writes, and I do actually want to go back and read a couple of other of his. He's got a bunch of short stories out. So I am going to give style a 1.
I hear thee.
I'm going to give style a 1. And I'm going to apologize.
Is that a question? Are you going to give style a 1?
No, I was going to say I'm going to give style a 1 and apologize because I was like sitting here going, what was my point of that rant before that Steve-O cut me off? So I'm sorry for the rant. I did have a point, but I'm going to give style a 1.
I'm sorry for your rant too.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
all of us are. But anyways.
I'm sorry for cutting you off. It would have been an interesting discussion.
Right.
No, you were right to.
We didn't have 45 more minutes.
No, you were right to.
I'm giving your rant to 0.
But I'm giving style a 1 because it does communicate what it has to say. Well, Ken Liu's a really great writer, and the fact that we can have this conversation says a lot. So I'm giving it a very strong 1.
Yeah. Agreed.
And Ian, would you recommend this?
Probably not. It has its merits, but I don't know a single person. I'm like, I want to read a bunch about blockchain. No, all right. Don't read this. So I'm going to give it a 0.
I probably would recommend it. Like I think I'm giving it a fairly strong score overall, so I think that follows suit that I should. And yeah, like I said at the outset, and we mentioned plot, I enjoyed reading the story. I was not like enamored, but I was never bored. I was never like, I want to put it down and come back. Like I read it all in one go. And while it might be a longer story, yes, I think it was quite engaging, at least is the word I want. So I'll probably give it a pretty decent, solid 1. I would recommend it.
This is a really interesting question because you're absolutely right, Ian. There are very few people.
I know what you mean.
Go
for sure
and,
in that aspect. But.
Seek out and be like, you know what book or you know what short story you should read? Byzantine Empathy. You want to read 40 pages, 25 of which are about how blockchain works? I really like this story. It's like very strange. It's like it was kind of up my all this stuff was kind of up my alley, and like
sure,
it's.
I mean, if you're going to be biased about it, then you're going to like it. But.
There are certain people I recommend this to. In fact, I might recommend it to like everybody at work. I work in an IT, a small IT company, and I might recommend that they go read it and just like, hey, you guys, like, are interested in things that are going on in the tech world. Like, this is about that, and also, you might be calling me like a total liberal, whatever. Actually, that's not true. There's a lot of liberal people that work there, but I think there are people that I would recommend this to that I know
because you work in tech. Like, I feel like I have to call. Do you enjoy the idea about blockchain? What is blockchain? Then don't read this. Yes, read this. No.
Sure. Like you said, you're qualifying it.
If it was like, do you want to know more about what Bitcoin is? Then you could read this and you'll learn a little bit about it. Like, that type of thing. Like, everybody knows what Bitcoin is, even if they don't know the term blockchain. I don't know. And don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna go up to people on the street and be like, "You need to read this story."
Breathlessly shove it in people's faces.
But there are definitely people that I would recommend it to. So I think I'm gonna give it a 1. But I completely get your point that there's it's a limited amount of people. Yeah. I run in a couple circles that there are people that would enjoy this. So I probably will end up recommending it to people. So I feel like I can't give it a 0 for it.
Yeah, no, I get you. Like, I guess I would say overall, I would generally recommend it more than I wouldn't. And I would say like you said, sort of like a 20 minutes in the future, mostly hard sci-fi, not even sci-fi really, it's just like speculative fiction. And I would say if you like William Gibson shit with a bit of Michael Crichton thrown in, then you might enjoy this, I guess.
Do you like the worst part about Michael Crichton books?
Anyway, I hate to keep overusing that, but still, that's my final thought on recommend.
I'm definitely going to recommend this, and it's not because of the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency or was it blockchain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's.
Wow, you got nothing out of this.
No.
Couldn't even remember the term for blockchain.
He learned nothing and achieved nothing.
But what stuck with me is because to me that was to explain the world, what was going on. That was that was a lot of part of motivation, direct charity versus, more of a socialized charity. But, hold on a second. I'll be reacting to the issues, the stuff we were talking about. Mm-hmm. I can think of people that I'm going to recommend it to where I'd be like, hey, Just get through the beginning. It's going to be a little technical, but the issues. I could think of several people I'd recommend this to.
No one actually cares about charity in America. So that was my rebuttal.
And they might still not even after reading the story.
Yeah. In fact, they might care less about it after reading the story.
Okay, so that's 3 1s and a 0. So, Steve-O, do you have our scores?
I do have the scores. So, Chris, you gave it a 9, the highest score. Scott and I both gave it 8s. And Ian, with the lowest score, I believe you gave it a 6. That is correct. And that makes the final overall score a 7.75.
Perfectly fine with that.
That's,
So,
yeah.
That's
strong enough.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, this was pretty heavy. Anyway.
The blockchain decided it was a good score, so.
Yeah.
So how's everybody doing?
I'm great. You want to talk for a while?
Sure.
No.
We're only at 50 minutes, so.
Jesus Christ. All right. I'm assuming nobody has anything to say. We'll discuss the rest afterwards. Anybody else?
No, that was a very contradictory
wrap
statement.
I mean, after we end this thing. All right.
Mhm.
I've been Chris Morgan. I've been here with Scott Thurlow.
Cut rate Michael Crichton.
I'm here with Jonathan Ian
For the love
Manzer
of God, let's end this.
and Stephen Hermosi.
And I'm even worse. I'm Dan Brown.
Good night.
See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.